So this happened years ago, when I was a dumb teenage girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe, in a city with a tramway system. On this one night, I sat in a tram station, waiting to catch the last tram home. 3 trams stopped at this station, 2 of which went where I was going. Important info for later. It was around 10 p.m., and as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quietly walking up and standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just someone else waiting for the tram. Until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark, and there was no one else in sight, just me and this guy. And I started wondering why he chose to stand this close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anyone wanting to socialize this late at night, given that I was not very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink it. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall and built like a bear, big belly and big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It was the fact that he was staring right at me, not blinking and expressionless, not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed. No, this guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky, cold shivers down my spine. This was not normal. I realized quickly that I was not in a good situation. I couldn't miss the last tram. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid and didn't have what it takes to scare this guy away. I knew that, but I had to at least try. I only managed to utter a small "hi," trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking. But my attempt failed in the face of his silent, threatening aura. He kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside me, I told myself to stay calm and think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me. Minutes passed. His stare continued to burn on my skin, and there was no tram in sight. Ignoring him didn't work. So I mustered the courage to speak once again, this time louder. "What do you want? Stop staring." No answer. He definitely heard me this time. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that his behavior didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and forced myself to start thinking. I knew what I can't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there's nothing I can say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up to me before I can tire him out, since his legs were much longer than mine. Even if I managed to somehow lose him, walking home through dark alleys, past the junkies and gypsies that were always prowling about, could land me in an even worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might feel compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So what can I do? The only thing I could realistically be able to do was to try and outsmart him somehow. So I started developing a few plans, depending on which trams showed up, trying to confirm whether he was just amusing himself and was actually waiting for a tram as well, or popped over for other, more suspicious reasons, and whether I could get any kind of help. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I'd have to be prepared to employ whatever strategy available, and for that, I needed to stay rational and aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was one I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the depot right in my neighborhood, forcing me to lead him to my home. I hoped he would board it and leave me be, but he didn't. He kept watching me carefully. I let the tram go, desperately hoping it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things were going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could now pretend that I needed the other tram, the one going to a different area of the city, and just ride to the next station, getting off as soon as possible, so I don't end up too far and miss the tram I need. This tram showed up next. With my heart in my throat, I boarded it and sat down by the door. He got on it too, but sat himself in the back, pretty far from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking this might still go well. When the tram reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back and hoping it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the tram drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly and was terrified to see him walking towards me, looking slightly pissed off. He stopped just a few steps away and resumed staring, this time with a clear hint of malice, still in silence. My vision blurred as I fought back tears of despair. He was not going to let me go. The helplessness I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry, I couldn't give up. I had to find a way. I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now, if I didn't, was becoming too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets, and horrible scenarios. I wanted so badly to not have to think anymore, to not have to fight back the tears and stay composed. But I knew this would be his cue to enact whatever fucked up plan he had in mind. I couldn't let that happen. Then, I saw the final tram approach, the only one I could take now, and got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me to. When I was in, bright lights enveloping me, my mind snapped out of its nightmarish spiral of fear and allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down at the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. We passed 1 stop. There was no one else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around, fully expecting to see that the psycho had followed me again, but I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He was not taking any chances. He was making sure I won't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposefully walked over to another seat in the middle of the tram cart. I wanted to make it clear, I will not put up with his BS any longer. He got up as well and slowly walked up to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonally from me, then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shot up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he won't have any idea which station I planned to get off at. He remained where he was this time, convinced that I was bluffing. After all, this was really the last tram. There was nothing else I could possibly do to escape now, he must have thought. So my defiance was just a funny act to him. This was my chance. I had to take the risk. It had to work. There were 3 doors on the tram, and they all opened and closed at the same time, and stayed open for around 5 seconds before closing again if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The tram slowed to a stop. The doors opened. I made no move. 5 long seconds passed. The doors started to close. I bolted out and ran for it, reaching the back door as fast as I could and slamming the button to open it again. My whole body tense with adrenaline. I waited a long, painful second and jumped back in, keeping my head low, holding my breath, and crouching behind the nearest seat. I shut my eyes tightly and exhaled slowly while thanking the gods I didn't believe in for that button working, and wishing with all my might for him to not have seen me before I got back in. As I was waiting to hear his footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the tram, face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat, ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station, mad eyes searching the darkness for me? As the tram continued its loud journey, banging and clanging in sync with my heartbeat, I dared smile to myself, imagining his face when he realized he messed up. Hand on my chest, I did my best to stealthily look around the corner and found no one looking back. I stood up in excitement and threw myself at the foggy back window. There he was, standing alone and victimless on that slowly fading out of sight station, watching me leave him and his vile plans behind. Giving someone the middle finger never felt so good. I made it home and told no one my story, for fear I'd be admonished for my naivety. But I was safe, I was proud of myself, and I learned my lesson. Creepy stranger, I hope the events of that day taught you to not underestimate girls, and prevented you becoming a criminal for the rest of your life. Let's never meet again. This story was when I was younger and braver and kinda did stupid stuff without thinking. It's a wild ride, and it's all true. I used to work at a pizza shop down the street from 2 p.m. until they closed. I usually didn't get off until 11 or so at night. I had a car, but it was close enough to walk, so I did that most days to save gas. This particular night, I was doing my usual thing, jamming to one of my playlists. Tired, but happy to have a good job, and just generally happy with the way my life was going. Up ahead, about a block from my place, I see an attractive guy in dark clothing walking, but not with a purpose really. He was taller than me, maybe 5'10" or so, and had shaggy brown hair. The closer I got to him, the more I could tell he was really good looking. Like, even in the dark of night, I was starting to get excited. His features kinda escape me now, but I do remember he had very thick eyebrows. I took an earbud out, and because I'm from a dangerous city and haven't really cared about stranger danger, I decide to talk to him, maybe even flirt a little bit. This is how our conversation went. "How is your late night going?" "It's good. Just looking to get drunk." "Oh, that I can help with. I've got a mini bar at my place. I live just down the street." During the walk back to my place, I got no red flags from this guy. He seemed totally normal, and I was honestly thinking, wow, just through sheer luck I meet this super hunky guy and he seems cool and fun. I was beside myself, really. So we get to my apartment on the second floor. I jump into host mode and offer him to have a seat and make himself comfortable. The apartment is about 640 square feet, so it's very small. Except for the bathroom, you can see the rest of the apartment from any area. I head into the kitchen, and while I'm pouring drinks, I glance back over at him. It was then that I noticed the first red flag. As I was asking him questions, he is more delayed with his answers, especially more so than he just was on our walk there. It was just odd to me. I go back over to the couch, pass him his drink, and sit down next to him. "So, what do you do for work?" I asked. "Oh, I'm not here for sex," he says as he puts his drink down on the table. "What do you mean? I'm not after sex either." He stands up. "What you got?" he asks me. His nice guy vernacular and friendly face are now gone. I'm having a hard time processing what he means by this. The second I stand up, he pushes me back. I fly across the room, hitting the floor, but not hard enough to pass out or anything. I get right back up, but he's already grabbed my laptop and my work bag. As I start towards him, he cuts around me and makes his way towards the front door. I'm right behind him when he makes it outside. I manage to grab hold of him and we tussle again in front of the door. Now I shout out, calling for help from the neighbors. It's late at night, so no one comes. I'm shouting, "Please help, I'm being robbed." The thing is, he has my laptop. It's not just any laptop. I hate to admit it, but my entire life was on that laptop at the time. Important photos that I did not have backed up, thousands of dollars of music programs, video game programming stuff for a development team I helped, really expensive software and everything. It was, in my mind, irreplaceable. I give chase down the stairs, across the dog walk park, and as I start to gain on him, we tussle again. And the only thing I can focus on is my laptop. I knew that I had to, at any cost, get my laptop back. That was absolutely all I cared about. Somehow I get a grip on my laptop. I tug at it again and I guess he decides I'm not worth all of this struggle. He gets up and starts to take off again. I now realize he still has my work bag. It has my cell phone and wallet, with my license, debit card, AAA card, in it. I take off towards him again and this time he shouts back at me, "Follow me and I'll stab you again." This makes me stop dead in my tracks, and he gets away. Underneath a street lamp, along the sidewalk, I immediately inspect myself. Was I stabbed? No way. There's no way. Then I see blood running down my leg. I see blood on my arm. 2 places where he cut me good. I'm scared, but the blood makes it look worse than it is. I decide that's enough. I got my laptop and that's all I really wanted anyway. I hobble back home and get inside and lock my door. I call the cops and file a police report explaining the situation, showing the stab wounds and decline medical services. I can't afford that, and I was fine all things considered. So all that guy got was a crappy cell phone and a wallet with like $30 or $40 in it. The cop called me back several days later and said that they were not able to find the guy and that he would keep me posted. This was years ago, so I don't know where the robber is now, but I have every electronic thing of importance backed up on multiple drives. To start this story, I'm female, and this happened when I was 22. I'm now in my 30s. At the time, I was preparing applications for grad school, so after work each evening I would go to the local university library and stay until closing, which was 11 p.m. I took the subway to my neighborhood and decided to make a quick stop at the nearby 24-hour grocery store to get some things for a late-night dinner. I bought my items and was back outside waiting at the crosswalk for the light to change so I could cross the street. There were at least 2 other people waiting at the crosswalk as well. I lived in a major metropolis, and so there were almost always other people around at whatever time of night or day. Suddenly, a man comes running from out of nowhere, it seemed, and stands next to me, now also waiting at the crosswalk. He was middle-aged, about 5'7", and had a slim build. I thought that maybe he just wanted to make sure he would make the light and not miss the chance to cross. However, as we are crossing the street, I noticed that he starts to make some odd movements with his legs. I don't really know how to describe it, other than to say he was kind of tripping himself up and drastically slowing down so that he went from walking in front of me to suddenly being directly behind me. To be honest, my first thought at the time was racism. I have a very petite and feminine build, looked very young, and was clutching library books in my arms, but I am also a black woman. I truly thought that he was scared to have me walk behind him. It never even entered my mind that I might be the one in danger. I simply noted his behavior, laughed it off, and then forgot about him. On my walk home, I passed a small convenience store that I frequented for inexpensive fresh produce that was also open 24 hours. I decided to make a quick stop and get a few more items for dinner. I was in the store for maybe 5 minutes and had truly forgotten about that man from the crosswalk. Except when I exited the store, he was standing outside. I was so startled. It looked like he had been waiting for me. My heart started to pound in my chest, and I was going into survival mode. As soon as I passed him and continued walking home, he also started walking, following right behind me. I could hear his steps and feel him nearby. I needed to make sure that he was actually following me so that I could plan my next move. I could see the entrance to the subway just ahead of me. I decided I would enter the subway station to see if he followed me in, but more importantly, to ask for help from the ticket collector. Unfortunately, when I went into the station, the ticket collector was not in the booth. The station was completely empty, no commuters either. I quickly decided to hide against a wall to the left, where I could not be seen from the street entrance. 30 seconds later, the man walked into the station so nonchalantly, he was almost skipping, as he headed right to the turnstile, as if it was his plan all along to take the train. However, at the last minute, he looked behind him and saw me standing there against the wall. As soon as he saw me, he stopped, turned completely around and walked out of the station, no longer intending to go down into the subway. I knew I was undeniably in danger. I took out my phone and called my roommate, let's call him Tim, praying he was home and would pick up. Luckily, he did. I explained in a panic what was happening. "Are you home? Can you come get me?" I asked. Tim asked me if the man was still there. I carefully peeked around the wall to look out to the street. There was the man. He was standing smoking and laughing with some guys. He was literally making friends as he waited for me outside the station. I told Tim, yes, the man is still there. A train must have arrived downstairs in the subway because at that moment there was suddenly a bunch of people coming through the turnstile and exiting the station. Tim and I agreed that I should leave the station in this crowd of people, stay on the phone with him, and he would meet me on the street. Essentially, we would walk towards each other. Our house was only a 5-minute walk away on the same street as the station. When I left the station, I had to pass the man. He saw me in the crowd. I saw him throw down his cigarette, and then from behind me I heard him say to the men he had been talking to, "I have to go." He continued to follow me. I told Tim everything, since we remained on the phone. I tried to walk as quickly as I could, but there was snow and ice on the sidewalk. I don't know why I didn't alert any of the other people who had exited the subway station and were now walking with me on the street. It was sort of this experience of feeling alone in a crowd, if you know what I mean. I knew the man was behind me, but was too scared to look back more than once to check. It felt like an eternity, but I finally saw Tim walking towards me on the sidewalk. We were both very young, but Tim is tall, over 6 foot. I felt a wave of relief as he came to my side. He told me he took a knife from the kitchen to defend us just in case. Our house was right ahead. We walked quickly inside and locked the door. With the lights off, we looked out the window for the man, but he was nowhere in sight.